Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Let the day soften around you and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1. The Desert Road at Late Afternoon. The caravan moves with the measured rhythm of late afternoon. Padded camel feet settle softly upon the pale road, one after another, pressing into dust and scattered gravel. Leather straps give an occasional low creak. Cloth-wrapped bundles sway beside woven saddlebags, rising and falling with every unhurried step. A small bell sounds now and then, never loudly, and its gentle note soon fades among the surrounding ridges. There is no need to hurry. The travelers are drawing near to Petra, where shelter, water, food, and familiar courtyards await. Most of the day's journey lies behind them. The light is growing softer, the shadows longer, and the warmth held by the road is beginning to ease. This quiet evening is imagined in the early to middle years of the 2nd century of the Common Era. Only a few decades have passed since Rome annexed the Nabatean kingdom in the year 106. Petra now lies within the Roman province of Arabia, and Roman authority has become part of the wider world around the city. Yet Petra remains deeply Nabatean. Its population, material culture, language, architecture, and religious traditions still carry the strong character of generations of Nabatean life. Nabatean letters appear in inscriptions, written in a flowing form of Aramaic. Families remember the kings who once ruled from here, while merchants and travelers continue to recognize the city as an established center of exchange, ceremony, and power. The Nabateans are an Arab people whose wealthy kingdom connected great regions of the ancient world. Their roads and relationships linked Arabia with Egypt, Syria, the lands of the Levant, and the Mediterranean coast. Other routes joined these networks from farther east, creating long chains of movement from one market and stopping place to another. Petra had been the capital and principal ceremonial center of the Nabatean kingdom. It flourished especially from the 1st century before the Common Era through the 2nd century after it. Now, under Roman rule, it remains a substantial and active city, with homes, temples, tombs, workshops, cultivated ground, storehouses, and gathering places sheltered among the mountains. The Nabatean name associated with the city is Rakhmu. The name Petra comes from Greek and means rock. Both names seem fitting for a place embraced by stone, though Rakhmu would have carried the deeper familiarity of home for many of those who lived here. The land rises in folded shapes. This is not a desert of endless, empty dunes. The country around Petra is varied and rugged, formed of sandstone mountains, winding wadis, narrow passages, open basins, and sheltered ledges. A wadi is a valley or channel that may remain dry through much of the year, then carry water after seasonal rain. Vegetation appears where moisture gathers. Springs emerge in certain places, and terraces cut into suitable slopes hold cultivated soil. The landscape is dry, but it is neither empty nor lifeless. Petra lies in what is now southern Jordan, between the Dead Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba. Its position near important routes helped connect southern Arabia with the Mediterranean world and the Levant. Yet the city's importance came from far more than the caravans passing through it. Petra was a political capital and a religious center. It was a residential city, an agricultural hub, and a place where people became highly skilled at gathering and managing water. Seasonal rain could be guided, captured, stored, and used with care. Trade brought wealth and connection, but Petra also depended upon farming, craft, ceremony, family life, and the patient knowledge required to sustain a city among these mountains. For now, the approaching travelers see only hints of all that lies ahead. Their caravan is small. Several camels walk in a loose line, accompanied by a few people on foot and perhaps a donkey carrying local provisions. The camels bear the larger loads, as they have done along many desert routes. Donkeys and other pack animals serve shorter journeys through settlements, cultivated areas, and mountain paths. The lead camel turns its head slightly as the road bends. Its long shadow reaches across the ground. Behind it, bundles have been balanced carefully on both sides of a padded saddle. One sealed package releases a faint resinous fragrance. It may contain frankincense or myrrh, valuable aromatic substances carried along the trade routes of Arabia and beyond. The scent is warm and woody, though the wrapping keeps most of it safely enclosed. Farther back, folded textiles reveal narrow bands of muted red and blue beneath their coverings. Another package has the steady weight of metal goods. A glass vessel, cushioned with fiber and cloth, has been tied so securely that it makes no sound at all. Caravans might carry spices, woven fabrics, precious or semi-precious materials, glassware, worked metal, and bitumen from the Dead Sea. Many such goods were valuable without being too bulky, making them well suited to long journeys across difficult country. Yet few objects traveled in one simple line from their original source to a final buyer. Goods often changed hands many times. One merchant sold to another. A bundle might be divided, repacked, and sent onward. A vessel could arrive in a market far from the workshop where it had first been formed. The people walking toward Petra may know where they obtained an item without knowing every road it followed before reaching them. Trade is made of such connections. Not one road, but many. Not one journey, but a series of patient exchanges. The caravan has already passed outlying settlements and stopping places that help travelers move through the region. Among them is the area now called Little Petra, north of the main city. Places such as this connected travelers with the capital, offering points where animals could rest, loads could be checked, and news could pass quietly from one group to another. Now the sunlight begins to soften further. Sandstone glows in broad bands of honey, rose, brown, and muted violet. On the upper ridges, the last light remains clear and warm. In the gullies below, shade has already gathered, cool and blue against the lingering gold. The travelers proceed into that shade. The air remains warm, but it no longer carries the full heat of the day. A camel exhales slowly. A handler places one hand against a bundle as the path tilts, feeling that the ropes are still firm. The donkey chooses its footing among smooth stones, its ears turning toward the small sounds of the group. A strap creaks, cloth brushes softly against cloth, hooves and padded feet continue over the road. There may be a few words between the travelers, spoken low and easily. They have no need to describe what all of them can see. The familiar signs are enough. A worked section of path, a distant terrace, a line of stone shaped by human hands, tracks left by others who passed earlier in the day. The caravan is nearing a place of rest, but the city itself does not yet appear. Beyond the ridges lies a busy and substantial center, concealed by the form of the land. Petra's monuments, streets, ceremonial spaces, and dwellings occupy valleys and slopes, enclosed by mountains. Approaching it is not like approaching a city spread openly across a plain. Here the way narrows gradually, the horizon becomes smaller, and the stone seems to gather around the traveler. For a while, a final strip of open sky remains above the road. Behind the caravan, western light rests upon the higher ridges. Ahead, the route winds between rising walls. The sandstone stands first at a distance, then closer, directing the travelers toward deeper shade. The sounds of the animals become more contained. Each padded footfall seems softer now, briefly held by the rock before fading. The travelers continue at the same calm pace. They carry aromatic resin and folded cloth, metal goods and protected glass, along with ordinary provisions for the journey. Each load has been checked and tied. Each animal follows the one ahead. The day's movement is almost complete. A cooler current of air drifts from the shadowed opening before them. It passes lightly across faces and hands, carrying the quiet of enclosed stone. The camels feel it too, and the lead animal lowers its head as the path bends once more. The last broad view of the late afternoon ridges begins to disappear. Open country gives way to a winding entrance between sandstone walls. Warm light remains above, while the road ahead lies in cool shadow. There is another low creak of leather. A bundle sways, then settles. The small bell gives one final note, subdued by the surrounding rock. Before them lies the approach to the Sikh. One by one the animals slow near the shade. The walkers shorten their steps. The donkey pauses, then continues. Behind them the open road rests beneath the fading light. Ahead the narrow way leads inward, toward Rakhmu, the city held among stone. The lead camel steps forward. The others follow in an easy line, their quiet footsteps passing from the broad desert road into the cooler air of the gorge. The sandstone walls draw nearer. The sky becomes a slender ribbon overhead, and the soft sounds of the caravan, once scattered across the open landscape, grow gentler as they enter the shade. Chapter 2. Entering the Sikh. The lead camel passes fully into the shade, and the others follow, one by one. Almost at once, the open desert seems farther away. The broad afternoon sky becomes a slender ribbon overhead, blue and bright between rising walls of sandstone. Behind the caravan, sunlight still rests upon the upper ridges. Here along the path, the air is cooler. The measured footsteps of the animals make small, rounded sounds against the stone. A harness shifts. A bundle creaks softly, then settles. Each sound is gathered by the gorge, carried a little way, and allowed to fade. This winding passage is the Sikh, Petra's famous eastern entrance. It extends for a little more than 1.2 kilometers, though its many turns make the distance difficult to judge. There is no long view from one end to the other. Instead, the way reveals itself gradually. A shaded bend, a slant of light, another bend, and then another quiet reach of stone. In some places the walls stand only a few meters apart. A traveler might look from one side to the other and feel that the mountain has opened just enough to permit a road. Far above, the narrowing strip of sky follows the same curves as the path. Sometimes it is broad enough to illuminate both walls. Sometimes it becomes a fine blue line, almost hidden by the leaning cliffs. The Sikh was formed through the patient work of earth and water. Natural faults and joints created weaknesses in the sandstone. Over long ages, erosion followed those lines, while seasonal runoff carried loosened sand and fragments of rock through the channel. The gorge deepened and widened, turn by turn, becoming a natural way through the mountains. It is part of a wadi, a valley or channel that may carry water after rain. For much of the year, such a place can appear dry. Yet when seasonal rain falls upon an arid landscape, water moves along familiar slopes and hollows, gathering wherever the land guides it. The Nabateans understood this changing environment with remarkable care. They did not treat the Sikh as an untouched canyon through which they merely happened to pass. They paved parts of its floor, carved niches into its walls, and constructed systems to manage water along the route. Nature shaped the passage first. Human hands then adapted it, making it a roadway, a sacred approach, and part of the wider waterworks of Petra. The caravan proceeds more slowly now. The animals place their feet carefully upon the worn way. In places, traces of ancient paving lie underfoot, smoothed by generations of travelers. Merchants and craftspeople, pilgrims and officials, farmers and families once moved through this same narrow corridor. Pack animals carried goods toward the city, while others turned outward toward roads leading across Arabia, the Levant, Egypt, and the Mediterranean world. Their movement has long since passed, yet the shape of the route remains. The walls preserve more than the marks of weather. Along both sides of the Sikh, channels once guided water toward Petra. One system included clay pipes, fitted together in sections, to carry spring water. Another used a covered channel cut into the rock. Protected within their carefully made courses, these small supplies could be guided through the dry landscape toward the city. Here and there a traveler may still notice the long line of a channel running beside the path. It seems modest beneath the immense cliffs, but its quiet regularity speaks of careful planning. The sandstone walls rise in folds and curves, while the channel keeps its deliberate course. In this gently imagined evening, there may be the faintest suggestion of water behind a covering stone. It is not a stream filling the gorge, and not a loud or hurried flow. It is only a small murmur, controlled and guided. Farther on comes a distant drip, then silence once again. In Petra, water could not be taken for granted. It had to be observed, directed, stored, and protected. The channels of the Sikh belonged to a larger system, one that depended upon a close understanding of the land and of the seasons. The Nabateans also arranged for sudden runoff to follow a different route. Near the entrance, a dam and an approximately 88-meter rock-cut diversion tunnel helped direct flash floods away from the Sikh. This work did not diminish the natural character of the gorge. Instead, it showed how attentively the city's builders studied the terrain, and how practically they responded to it. They knew where water gathered after rain. They understood the channels it followed. With dams, tunnels, carved courses, and patient maintenance, they guided it away from the principal approach. In a generally arid country, even brief seasonal rain was part of careful city planning. The caravan rounds another bend. The narrowing strip of sky shifts with them. On the left, the sandstone glows softly where the descending sun reaches it. Rose passes into cream. Cream deepens into rust. A violet-brown band runs like a long brushstroke through the wall, and higher above, a narrow ledge shines with gold. These colors reflect different minerals and chemical processes within the sandstone, especially those involving compounds of iron and manganese. No single mineral explains every visible band. The stone holds a varied record, written in layers and veins, in stains, soft transitions, and broad fields of changing color. A camel's shadow moves across the glowing wall. For a moment, the long curve of its neck lies against the rose-colored stone. Then the animal passes around the turn, and the shadow disappears. Again, the strip of sky narrows. In the cooler turns, the walls appear darker and smoother. Elsewhere they are rippled, as though water had once drawn broad folds through the rock. Small hollows gather the shade. Thin seams cross the larger bands. The surfaces seem to change every few steps, although the caravan's pace remains steady and slow. The gorge is close here, but it does not hurry anyone. Its winding shape invites patience. Each bend can be entered only when it arrives. Each view waits quietly behind the one before it. At intervals, carved niches interrupt the natural patterns of the walls. Some hold sacred stone representations, often called beetles. A beetle is a stone understood to represent, or in some sense embody, a divine presence. Such forms could be simple and upright, rather than shaped into a detailed human figure. To people passing through the sick in antiquity, these stones may have marked the route with signs of reverence and belonging. They stand as quiet landmarks, set between the civic road and the high natural walls. In this imagined caravan, no one speaks loudly near them. A guide lowers his voice. One traveler pauses for a breath, while another looks toward the carved recess. Then the line continues, leaving the niche within the cool shadow of the sandstone. There are other carved traces along the way, worn outlines, cut surfaces softened by time, edges rounded by footsteps, wind, and flowing water. Together, these traces make the sick feel neither entirely wild nor entirely built. It is both at once. It is a natural gorge, shaped by faults, runoff, and erosion, yet also a managed entrance, paved and altered by people who knew its every turn. It is a route into the city, a place of sacred markers, and a carefully tended passage for animals, travelers, and water. The path bends again, and the western light can no longer be seen behind the caravan. Still, the gorge is not dark. Light descends from above in quiet reflections, passing from one sandstone surface to another. A sunlit wall lends muted warmth to the wall opposite it. Cream-colored bands hold the glow a little longer, while violet-brown layers settle into the shade of evening. The caravan has grown almost silent. The animals no longer need urging. They follow the winding path, as though the stone itself were leading them. Their padded steps keep an even rhythm. A hoof touches the worn paving. A leather strap shifts. Cloth brushes gently against a bundle. Between one footfall and the next, there is the stillness of the high walls, the faint coolness beside the channels, and the slender blue ribbon of sky. A little farther on, the passage begins to change. The air seems less enclosed. The blue above widens almost imperceptibly, and the next bend carries a pale reflection unlike the warm, irregular bands nearby. It is steadier than the shifting sunlight on the natural wall, straighter too. At first there is only a narrow edge beyond the shadow. The lead camel takes another measured step. The walkers follow. No one needs to call attention to what lies ahead. Their faces turn toward it naturally. A column appears, slender and pale against the darker stone. For a few moments, that is all the sick allows them to see. A single vertical form, carefully carved, glimpsed through the final narrowing of the gorge. Then, with several more quiet steps, a broader surface comes into view beside it. Straight lines meet shaped ornament. Pale rose sandstone bears the patient work of human hands. The form ahead is still partly hidden, held between the close walls, revealed only in fragments as the caravan approaches. Column, shadow, carved surface. The immense cliffs seem to draw apart. The strip of sky grows wider. Cool air rests in the opening beyond. Footsteps pass around the final bend, and the sick begins to release the caravan into a quiet, open court. Chapter 3. The First View of Al-Khazne. At first, The eye finds only the pale top of a column. It stands beyond the shaded walls of the Seek, touched by light that seems brighter after the long passage through the gorge. Above the column is a carved capital, the decorated crown of the stone shaft. Stone leaves curl outward in the Corinthian style, an ornate classical form that found a new expression here, among the rose-colored cliffs of Petra. The caravan continues for a few quiet steps. More of the facade appears, not all at once, but in measured portions. The edge of a pediment comes into view, a triangular architectural feature set above columns, or an entrance. Then another column appears, then a darker doorway, still partly hidden by the final bend of the gorge. The travelers do not hurry. After the winding path of the Seek, the open court invites a slower gaze. Eyes accustomed to shadow need time to adjust to the reflected sandstone light. The ground remains cool beneath the shade of the cliffs, while high above, the last amber sunlight rests upon carved ledges and weathered figures. With each step, the view widens. The single column becomes part of a broad and carefully ordered design. The pediment finds its place above the entrance. Upper carvings emerge from behind the wall of the Seek, and the natural cliff gives way to the immense work of human hands. Gradually, Al-Khazna stands before the caravan. Its modern Arabic name is commonly translated as the Treasury. It is a memorable name, although it belongs to a later age and does not establish the monument's original purpose. The building was almost certainly connected with burial and elite commemoration. It was probably a monumental royal tomb or mausoleum. A mausoleum is a large and imposing tomb, created to preserve the memory and status of the person associated with it. Exactly who commissioned Al-Khazna remains uncertain. Its date is also debated. A connection with the Nabatean king Aratus IV is plausible, but it has not been proven. The monument offers many details to the patient observer, yet it keeps part of its history within the stone. What can be seen is remarkable enough. The facade rises roughly 39 to 40 meters above the ground. Despite its great height, it was not assembled by placing one block upon another. The entire front was carved directly into the sandstone cliff. The work probably began high above the finished entrance, from a prepared ledge. From there, teams of carvers likely worked downward. Loose stone and chips could fall away from the unfinished surface, without damaging completed carvings below. The method required careful planning. Before the lower columns had emerged, and before the doorway had taken its final shape, the broad proportions of the facade had to be understood. It is possible to imagine the patience of that labor without disturbing the stillness of the court. Measurements were marked, surfaces were prepared, stone was removed a little at a time. As the carvers descended, the natural wall gradually became an ordered arrangement of columns, pediments, figures, floral designs, and shadowed recesses. Each stage depended upon the work above it. Each new detail emerged from the same continuous face of sandstone. The upper portion appears light and intricate above the strong lower level. At its center stands a round structure often described as a tholos, a circular architectural form. It is framed by slender columns and divided pediments. Nearby are carved flowers, eagles, figures, and other motifs whose meanings are not always certain. A central female figure stands among these upper carvings, weathered by time. Her identity remains uncertain. Many interpretations have been offered, but no single answer can be given with confidence. This uncertainty is part of looking carefully at Ancient Petra. Some features can be measured and described with precision. Others allow only thoughtful possibilities. Knowledge and mystery remain side by side. The design reflects a world of wide connections. Its Corinthian-style columns are topped by ornate leafy capitals. Its pediments and other classical forms recall Hellenistic architecture. The word Hellenistic refers to the Greek-influenced cultures that developed after Alexander the Great. Those influences reached across many regions and were adapted in different ways. At Al-Khazna, Hellenistic forms mingle with Egyptian, regional, and distinctively Nabatean elements. These details were not simply gathered and placed together without thought. Nabatean artists combined them into a design suited to their city, their sandstone, and their own understanding of dignity and remembrance. The result belongs fully to Petra. In the fading light, every part of the facade seems to hold a slightly different color. Broad surfaces appear pale rose. Narrow cuts deepen toward red and brown. Beneath the ledges, cool shadows gather. The highest carvings retain a soft amber edge, while the great entrance below opens into quiet darkness. Beyond that entrance, the interior chambers are comparatively plain. The contrast is gentle but striking. Outside, the cliff has been transformed into an elaborate public face, rich with columns, pediments, figures, and ornament. Inside, the spaces are broad, still, and largely undecorated. Much of the monument's visual meaning was expressed through its facade, where it could be seen by those arriving through the Seek. The stone face met travelers before the shadowed rooms within ever could. Recent discoveries beneath the forecourt have strengthened the understanding that this place had a funerary purpose. Evidence found there supports a connection with burial and commemoration. Yet these discoveries do not identify with certainty who commissioned the monument, who was commemorated within it, or every use the chambers and forecourt may once have had. And so the travelers see certainty and uncertainty held within the same wall. They see the evidence of skilled planning and sustained labor. They see architectural forms carried across connected lands, then reshaped by Nabatean hands. They see a monument almost certainly made for burial and remembrance. But the personal name at the center of its story remains beyond reach. For a while, the caravan pauses in the open court. A camel raises its head toward the widening sky. Another shifts its weight, and the soft scrape of a padded foot crosses the ground. The sound returns faintly from the surrounding stone, no longer held close by the narrow walls of the Seek. The animals are quiet after their measured journey. The travelers stand quietly too, allowing the scale of the facade to settle into their thoughts. There is no need to explain everything at once. The monument has waited through many evenings. It can be observed slowly. It would be easy to imagine that all Petra was carved into rock. Al-Khazneh encourages that impression because it seems inseparable from the mountain itself. Yet Petra was never only a city of cliff-cut facades. These monuments formed one part of a much broader city. Beyond this place were homes, temples, streets, shops, and civic structures. Some spaces were cut into stone, while others were built in the open. Petra was not simply a landscape of tombs and ceremonial fronts. It was a lived-in city, shaped by ordinary routines as well as monumental acts of commemoration. People moved along its streets and entered its shops. Goods arrived and were counted. Water was carried and carefully stored. Harnesses and ropes were handled by practiced hands. Familiar faces met beneath the surrounding cliffs, while carved monuments stood above the passing rhythms of daily life. Al-Khazneh is therefore more than the entrance to a shadowed chamber. For the travelers, it is also an introduction to the larger city beyond. Its stillness stands beside movement. Its ancient purpose stands beside the practical needs of evening. Monumental stone and ordinary life share the same cooling air. The caravan begins to move again, though only a short distance. Evening gathers slowly around the facade. The upper sandstone remains luminous for a little longer, holding the last warmth of the sun, while the court below deepens into blue shade. Details that were clear moments ago begin to soften. Leafy capitals merge with their columns. Figures settle into their niches. Fine floral designs become quiet patterns of light and shadow. The great doorway darkens into a single, restful rectangle. The travelers guide their animals toward one side of the court, making room for others to pass and for the city's evening routines to continue. Behind them, Al-Khazneh remains still. Its upper carvings hold a final trace of amber light, while its lower stone rests in the cool shade. The close echo of the sick gives way to softer, more practical sounds. A strap is loosened. A folded length of cloth settles over a bundle. A camel releases a long, low breath. Rope slips steadily through an open hand. One animal is guided forward, then another. Their steps are slower now. The journey through the gorge is finished, and the work of arrival begins. The monumental facade stays silent behind the travelers, as loads are steadied, and the animals are led toward water. Chapter 4. A Caravan Comes to Rest. The animals move away from the open court before Al-Khazneh, following their handlers at an easy pace. Their feet press broad, uneven shapes into the dust, crossing older tracks left by sandals, hooves, and wooden wheels. Somewhere ahead, water has been prepared for travelers and pack animals. Its presence is announced not by a rushing stream, but by smaller signs. There is the darkened edge of a trough, the careful course of a channel, and the soft lift of a camel's head as it recognizes a familiar place. Water and fodder are the first concerns. The bundles can wait a little longer. Records can wait. Even greetings may be delayed while the animals that carried the caravan across dry country are led forward and tended. Camels are well suited to desert travel. They can carry substantial loads, walk across stony or sandy ground, and endure conditions that would be difficult for many other animals. Yet they still need care, rest, food, and water. Donkeys also serve Petra and the surrounding region, carrying smaller loads along local paths or between nearby settlements, gardens, workshops, and storehouses. In this quiet possible evening, camels have brought goods from farther away, while a few donkeys wait nearby to carry selected bundles on shorter journeys through the city. The handlers begin their work with practiced movements. Knots are loosened, ropes are coiled rather than dropped, woven straps, warmed by the day, slide away from padded saddles. One worker places a steadying hand against a bundle, while another frees it from its fastening. Together, they lower it onto a reed mat spread over the ground. Nothing needs to be hurried. One camel folds its long legs and settles with a low breath. Another remains standing until its load has been removed, then kneels beside the first. The animals turn their heads, their expressions calm and unreadable, while the remaining packs are lifted down. A donkey shakes its ears and accepts a little fodder. Light leaves the lower walls, and the air beside the stone grows pleasantly cool. Petra was deeply connected to trade, both across long distances and within its own region. Routes linked the city with Arabia, the Levant, Egypt, and lands around the Mediterranean. Goods might travel for weeks or months, passing from one merchant to another. They might move by ship for one part of a journey, and by caravan for another. A bundle arriving in Petra did not necessarily belong to the person who had first prepared it, and its journey did not always end here. It might be sold or exchanged. It might be stored, divided, repacked, or sent onward with another caravan. Among the valuable goods associated with these routes were frankincense and myrrh, fragrant resins gathered from trees farther south, spices, textiles, glassware, metal goods, and precious or semi-precious materials also moved through interconnected markets. Dead Sea bitumen, a naturally occurring substance used for several practical purposes in the ancient world, could travel from the region of the Salt Lake toward distant buyers. Many of these goods were valuable partly because they were portable. They could be racked, sealed, and carried over great distances. Their aromas, when they had any, were not always strong in the open air. Resins and spices were often protected inside containers or beneath layers of cloth and leather. Still, perhaps a faint woody sweetness escapes when one small package is examined. For a moment, it mingles with dust, wool, leather, and the familiar scent of resting animals. Nearby, one might imagine a trader running his fingers along a binding to make sure it has held. Another studies the surface of a pottery jar, looking for a crack. A piece of glassware, carefully packed in straw or cloth, remains concealed within a container. Metal goods rest together with a quiet weight. Folded textiles form softer shakes, their colors mostly hidden beneath plain coverings that protected them along the road. The exact routines followed by Petra's merchants are not fully known. Few business archives from the city have survived to explain how an individual caravan was received, how fees were calculated, or how each load was recorded. So this intimate evening scene must be imagined with care. Perhaps near a low wall, a clerk notes the arrival of certain bundles. The writing surface might be a tablet, a pottery sherd, parchment, or papyrus. The particular choice cannot be known here. What is known is that Nabatean writing was alphabetic and Semitic, and that it was written from right to left. Thousands of short Nabatean inscriptions survive. They preserve names, dedications, memorials, and other brief traces of people who once lived in or moved through this landscape. The imagined clerk makes a few deliberate marks. A merchant answers a quiet question, a wrapping is checked, and a bundle is placed beside others from the same shipment. Some goods may remain in storage, some may be prepared for sale within Petra, others may later be transferred to different animals and carried north, west, or south, or toward cultivated lands around the city. The exchange of goods depended on many more people than merchants alone. Caravan workers knew the road and cared for the loads. Animal handlers tended camels and donkeys. Local officials may have overseen parts of commercial life. Craftspeople repaired leather straps, pottery vessels, tools, and fittings. Providers of lodging and fodder offered practical support to those newly arrived. Guards could accompany valuable cargo, while porters and storehouse workers helped move it from one place to another. Each person performed a small part of the work that connected distant places. Yet Petra was not simply a station for passing caravans. Trade was important, but it was only one part of the city's life. Petra also contained homes and religious places, civic buildings and workshops, water systems and storehouses. Agricultural work supported the city and the lands around it. Generations of local people lived here according to rhythms that continued whether a particular caravan arrived or not. Some residents depended directly on commerce. Others grew crops, carved stone, shaped pottery, maintained channels, prepared food, served in religious settings, practiced crafts, or managed households. The arriving travelers had entered a substantial city with its own needs, customs, and daily routines. As evening deepens, more than one language might be heard among the people gathered here. Petra was a cosmopolitan center, visited by travelers from different regions. The exact mixture of languages at any one time is uncertain, but it is reasonable to imagine unfamiliar words passing beside familiar ones. There may be a brief greeting, a place name, or a number repeated for clarity. Nabatean speech belongs naturally in the city, while travelers from elsewhere may carry the sounds of their own homes with them. The voices do not rise, they soften as each small task is completed. A final jar is set upright. A folded textile is placed beneath a protective covering. The clerk, if we imagine one here, pauses with the day's marks complete. A worker draws the edge of a mat over a group of smaller packages, sheltering them from dust. Another checks the ropes once more, not because there is urgency, but because this is how careful work comes to an end. At the water, the animals have grown still. Reflections tremble faintly when a muzzle touches the surface, then settle again. Fodder lies in shallow baskets, or upon clean ground. Saddles and harnesses have been placed nearby, ready to be examined in better light. The camels rest on folded legs. The donkeys stand close to the wall, their earlier steps reduced to an occasional, quiet shift. Petra's water systems make this moment possible. The water waiting here has been guided, captured, and conserved within an arid landscape. For now, it is enough simply to notice its cool presence. A channel follows the stone. A trough holds what the animals need. Small circles spread across the surface and fade. The caravan has arrived, but arrival is not a single moment. It is a gradual easing of weight. Loads pass from animal backs to waiting mats. Responsibility moves from the open road to the storehouse, lodging place, and city street. Names and quantities are remembered or perhaps recorded. Water is shared. Fodder is offered. Dust settles into the lines of the ground. One task ends and then another. The last ropes are gathered. The final package is placed beside the others. Hands that have been busy with straps, cloth, and bindings begin to rest. A camel releases a long breath. Somewhere nearby, a vessel is set gently upon stone. The sound is brief, and the silence that follows seems a little deeper. At last, the remaining bundle is covered for the night. Now the gaze can lift beyond woven cloth, reed mats, and overlapping animal tracks. Around the resting caravan, Petra takes shape in the evening light. Carved cliffs rise above masonry walls. Shaded doorways open into spaces not yet explored. Farther away, columns stand in patient rows, their edges touched by the last pale glow of day. The city is no longer merely a backdrop to the road. It is a place where carved stone and built stone meet. Monuments stand near homes and working spaces. Travelers settle among residents. Distant trade becomes part of ordinary labor, and ordinary labor becomes part of the life of the city. The caravan rests within Petra now. Its goods are covered. Its animals are watered and fed. Its workers have allowed their voices to fall quiet. Beyond them, facades emerge from cliffs, walls rise from the ground, and doorways deepen into shade. Many kinds of buildings and many kinds of lives gather here in the cooling evening. Chapter 5: The City Carved and Built. Beyond the resting caravan, Petra gathers itself from shadow and stone. At first, the eye is drawn toward the cliffs. Their broad surfaces hold the last light of evening, glowing in muted bands of rose, amber, and soft brown. Doorways appear within them. Some are plain and narrow. Others are framed by carefully carved columns and pediments. From a distance, these openings seem to lead into the mountain itself, as though the whole city had grown from the rock without the use of separate walls. Yet Petra was never a city carved entirely from stone. The cliffs provided chambers, tombs, shrines, and places for ritual dining. Beyond them stood a city built by other means as well. Masons shaped blocks and laid them in courses. Carpenters supplied beams, doors, shutters, and roof supports. Plasterers covered rough walls with smoother surfaces, and painters added color. There were temples, houses, villas, shops, gates, baths, workshops, and civic buildings. Colonnades bordered streets and open spaces. Gardens occupied carefully watered ground. Fountains offered the sight and sound of water. Dining rooms received families, visitors, and formal gatherings. The famous rock-cut facades belonged to this larger whole. Many marked tombs, especially the resting places of prosperous families or important individuals. Others were associated with ritual meals, shrines, remembrance, or specialized purposes that are no longer fully understood. They were not simply ordinary houses for the living, although living people approached them, cared for them, gathered near them, and understood meanings in their carved forms that may now be difficult to recover. Near the caravan, a small doorway opens into a rock-cut chamber. Its entrance is simple, without the tall columns and layered ornaments seen on Petra's grandest monuments. Within, the evening air is cooler. Faint marks remain on the walls, traces of the work required to shape a room from the cliff. A shallow recess has been cut along one side, and a low bench follows part of the wall. The chamber appears plain now, but bare stone can be misleading. In ancient Petra, buildings and interiors could be covered with plaster and paint. Stucco could smooth a surface, shape architectural details, or enrich a capital. Color could define panels, borders, and decorative forms. What survives in later ages as exposed sandstone and masonry may once have looked brighter, smoother, and more finished. Modern Petra is often remembered through the natural colors of its stone. Ancient Petra also possessed the colors chosen by its builders and occupants. Stepping outside again, the meeting of carved and constructed architecture becomes easier to see. A masonry wall crosses the foot of the cliff, its blocks fitted together by practiced hands. At one end it joins a chamber cut partly into the rock. It supports a room extending toward a courtyard. Some residences combined both methods. A household might use the cliff as the rear of a dwelling and add masonry rooms in front. Elsewhere, a home might be built more fully from stone blocks. Petra contained modest houses as well as larger villas, and these residences formed an essential part of the city. It is pleasant to imagine their rooms settling into evening. Movement grows slower in the courtyards. A doorway remains open to the cooling air. The last tasks of the day continue quietly behind masonry walls and within chambers shaped from rock. These homes are less commanding than the monumental facades above them, yet they belong just as surely to Petra. Farther along, the passage widens. A paved court lies between rows of columns, though the deepening shadow has begun to simplify its details. Steps become broad gray bands. Doorways deepen into quiet rectangles. The upper portions of the columns still catch a little light, and one elaborate capital shows curling leaves beneath its square top. That leafy form speaks of artistic traditions from beyond Petra, but it does not stand here as a foreign object. Nabatean builders knew styles associated with the Hellenistic world. They also drew upon Roman, Egyptian, Mesopotamian, local Arabian, and other regional traditions. A triangular pediment might rise above a doorway. Plant ornament might curl across a capital. Monumental forms known in distant cities could appear beside features shaped by the landscapes and customs of Arabia. The Nabateans did not merely copy what they encountered. They selected, adapted, and reshaped. A form known from one region could be given different proportions or placed in a new arrangement. Imported ideas could be joined to local building practices. A familiar decorative element might appear on a distinctly Nabatean cliff tomb or within a courtyard designed for life in Petra. These influences became a quiet conversation in stone. A leafy capital stood beside a rock-cut chamber. A classical column rose before an Arabian landscape. Painted plaster covered masonry laid by local builders. Distant traditions arrived through travel and exchange, then settled into forms that belonged to this city. The result was recognizably Petra. By this evening, in the early or middle years of the 2nd century, Roman rule has become part of the city's public life. Roads, civic spaces, and buildings reflect development during the Roman period. New construction stands beside older Nabatean work, and some buildings have been adapted into different uses. Even so, Petra remains strongly Nabatean in cultural character. Local families and inherited customs continue to shape the city. Nabatean religious traditions, regional knowledge, and established ways of building remain present beneath the broader influence of Roman administration. As the Nabatean capital, Petra is much more than a stopping place for merchants. It is a political center, where authority is organized and expressed. It is a religious center, with temples, shrines, sacred precincts, and gathering places. It is residential, filled with households and ordinary routines. It is commercial, receiving travelers and goods from long roads. It is also connected to agriculture, with cultivated land and water systems supporting life around the city. No single view can contain all of it. From one place, Petra seems to be a city of tombs. From another, it appears to be a city of temples and columns. Along a commercial street, it becomes a place of shops, storerooms, workshops, and measured goods. Near a house, it is a place of evening meals, familiar voices, shaded rooms, and water carefully used. One view does not replace another. They rest beside each other, as cliff and wall rest side by side. Near the city center stands the complex now called the Great Temple. Its modern name suggests one clear purpose, although the history of the complex was more complicated. It included broad paved courts, stairways, columns, elaborate capitals, and rooms that changed in use over time. Painted stucco brought color and detail to some of its surfaces. People altered parts of the complex. They repaired its structures and found new ways to occupy its spaces. A court, chamber, or passage did not necessarily retain one purpose forever. The building lived through change, as the city around it did. That pattern belongs not only to the Great Temple complex, but to Petra as a whole. A building is completed, and later it is adjusted. A doorway is opened or closed. A floor is changed. A wall is repaired. A room intended for one activity begins to serve another. Nabatean Petra passes into the Roman period, and later into Byzantine, and still later times. Each age preserves something, alters something, and leaves another layer within the city. It would therefore be misleading to imagine every surviving wall, tomb, stair, temple, gate, and column standing together in one perfect moment. The Petra visible in later ruins is an accumulation. Some structures had already been altered, while others were newly built. Some old rooms remained useful. Other spaces grew quiet. Petra was not fixed. Now, as daylight thins, those many periods seem to settle gently against one another. A carved facade grows dim above a repaired masonry wall. A paved court holds the fading warmth of the day. Plaster turns pale in the dusk. Columns become steady vertical shadows, and smaller doorways almost disappear. The city's complexity grows restful in the evening. Tombs, houses, temples, shops, workshops, gardens, baths, and civic spaces no longer compete for attention. Their outlines soften. Carved stone and built stone share the same cooling air. Along the edge of the path, something catches a narrow gleam. It is not part of a grand facade, nor an ornament intended to be seen from far away. It is a slender line beside the wall, nearly hidden beneath a fitted stone cover. The channel follows the slope with quiet precision. Nearby, the air feels cooler, at the shaded mouth of a cistern. Stored water rests beyond sight. For a while, Petra's monuments recede. Attention leaves the tall columns, painted walls, and carved cliffs. It follows instead that nearly hidden course beside the path. Here is another part of the city, less visible, but essential. In the deepening evening, the thin channel leads onward, toward reservoirs, cisterns, and the quiet keeping of water. Chapter 6. Channels, Cisterns, and Quiet Water. The narrow channel beside the path is easy to overlook. It does not command the eye as a carved facade does, and it offers no broad stairway or columned entrance. Much of it lies beneath fitted slabs of stone, protected from falling sand and the warmth of the sun. Only where one cover has been lifted can its purpose be seen clearly. It is a shallow course, carefully shaped, descending by a gentle measure through the city. In the imagined evening, a caretaker kneels beside the opening. He runs a wooden tool along the channel and removes a little gathered grit. There is no hurry in his work. He has followed this route many times, learning where sand tends to settle and where a small obstruction might turn a useful trickle aside. When the channel is clear, he lowers the stone cover into place. Its edges meet the surrounding surface with a muted sound. The water continues in darkness. In Petra, such quiet work helped make city life possible. The surrounding landscape could appear dry for long stretches of time. Rainfall was seasonal and irregular. Some showers passed quickly, leaving only a darkening of the sandstone. At other times, water gathered in rocky valleys and in the beds of wadis. A wadi is a valley or streambed that may remain dry for much of the year, yet carry runoff after rain. The Nabateans could not depend upon rain arriving slowly or conveniently. Instead, they developed a coordinated system that drew upon springs and captured seasonal runoff. Water was slowed, redirected, collected, and guided toward places where it could settle, be stored, and then be used with care. Along some routes, spring water traveled toward Petra over considerable distances. It moved through channels cut directly into rock, through channels built of masonry, and through fitted ceramic pipes hidden behind walls or laid along slopes. An aqueduct is a channel or structure that carries water from one place to another. Although not every channel at Petra needs that name. Some were modest local courses. Others belonged to longer lines that brought spring water toward the settled valleys. The slope mattered. If water descended too quickly, it might damage a channel or spill away. If the course was too level, the flow might slow and leave more sediment behind. Builders observed the land closely. They followed ridges cut into stone, raised supporting walls, and adjusted the gradient little by little. It was patient engineering, shaped by careful measurements, across a rugged landscape. Near one wall, a line of clay pipe sections rests beyond sight. Each section narrows at one end so that it can fit into the next. The joints are sealed, and the pipe is protected within the structure around it. Water passing through does not need to be abundant to be valuable. A low, steady movement can fill a basin over time. A vessel placed beneath an outlet may receive one clear measure after another. Water brought into Petra often carried fine sand or grit. Before continuing through parts of the system, it could enter a settling basin, where its movement slowed. Suspended particles gradually sank to the bottom. Clearer water could then pass onward, while the basin itself could be cleaned as part of ordinary maintenance. In the cooling air, one such basin holds a still surface. A faint mineral scent rises from it. At the bottom lies a thin layer of pale sediment, gathered from stone and soil farther upslope. Tomorrow, someone may remove it. For now, the basin rests, performing its simple task through stillness. Other structures worked on a broader scale. Dams and diversion works slowed or redirected water after rain. They helped protect settled areas from sudden runoff, while also keeping precious water from rushing unused through the valleys. Some flows were guided toward storage, others were spread across cultivated ground or turned away from vulnerable places. Flood protection and water conservation could therefore be parts of the same design. Water was not merely stopped, it was guided into safer, more useful paths. Beyond the city, agricultural terraces stepped across suitable slopes. Retaining walls held soil in place, while runoff management, irrigation, and access to springs helped support farming around Petra. The land remained demanding, and harvests still depended upon season and circumstance. Yet terraces could slow water, reduce the loss of soil, and create cultivated places along the rocky slopes. Within the city, storage brought another kind of security. A cistern is a built or rock-cut chamber used to hold water. Some were carved into stone, with interiors protected by plaster to reduce seepage. Their openings could be narrow or covered, limiting evaporation and helping to keep out dust and debris. Beneath the dry surface, each chamber held cool air and dark water. At one storage opening, a rope descends into the quiet below. A jar follows it, turning slightly as it passes from the evening light. There is a soft touch of pottery against stone, and then the subdued sound of water receiving the vessel. When the jar rises again, Its sides are damp and darker than before. Only the needed amount is drawn. A lid is settled over the opening. The stored water returns to shadow. Reservoirs also collected and held water, generally on a larger scale. Their forms and purposes varied, just as Petra's channels, dams, pipes, and cisterns varied. Modern surveys have counted these features in different ways, and published totals do not always agree. Boundaries can be uncertain, and researchers may classify the same feature differently. It is enough to understand that the system was extensive, interconnected, and continually dependent upon care. For no matter how skillfully water was gathered, it was never unlimited. Channels needed cleaning, pipes needed repair, plaster could crack, storage openings needed covers, and distribution required judgment. A measured cup for drinking, a basin filled for household work, and a trough prepared for animals all belonged to a daily practice of careful allocation. Water supported drinking, cooking, washing, agriculture, travelers, and pack animals. It could serve ritual activity as well, though the exact forms of some Nabatean practices remain uncertain. Managed water also supplied fountains, gardens, and pools, bringing coolness and comfort into the life of the city. Petra's ornamental pool and garden complex shows that water could provide prestige, beauty, and pleasure as well as necessity. In a landscape of warm sandstone and open sky, a pool could reflect columns, greenery, and passing light. Garden plants could soften a court with leaves and shade. Water held where patient engineering had placed it, expressed hospitality and accomplishment. Yet even such graceful spaces depended upon hidden labor. Channels had to be inspected, basins had to be cleared, cracks had to be repaired. Every pleasing surface rested upon measured flow, ordinary maintenance, and attention to the seasons. The city's fountains and pools were the visible ends of an often invisible system. As evening deepens, the contrast becomes gentle and clear. Above ground, the sandstone remains dry, giving back the last warmth of the day. Beneath a lid, behind a wall, and within a clay pipe, water keeps its coolness. It waits in cisterns, settles in basins, and moves through narrow porces with scarcely a sound. The caretaker passes once more along the wall. He places his palm near an outlet and feels the faint coolness there. Satisfied, he continues toward the city center, carrying a small lamp that makes the nearby stone briefly golden. The channel travels with him. Its covered course follows the slope until the surrounding space begins to widen. The walls draw back. Ahead, paving stones lie in long level bands, their edges softened by fading light. Columns rise beyond them, pale at their upper edges and shadowed below. Here, hidden water begins to enter public life. A managed trickle emerges into a fountain or basin near the city's main street, no louder than a quiet conversation. The surface trembles, catches the evening sky, and becomes still again. Around it, footsteps pass more slowly now. The deep work of springs, channels, pipes, dams, reservoirs, and cisterns has become a small, clear sound among paving stones and columns, accompanying Petra into the calm of evening. Chapter 7. Along the colonnaded street. Near the small public basin, the water settles after each faint disturbance. A reflection of the pale evening sky rests upon its surface, crossed now and then by the passing shadow of a robe, an arm, or a vessel carried home. Beyond the basin, Petra's main street stretches through the widening valley, following ground that has carried footsteps for generations. The last gentle traces of commerce are fading. A merchant loosens the cord of an awning and lowers the woven cloth with both hands. It descends slowly, folding away the shade it offered during the brighter hours. Nearby, a balance scale is lifted from a counter. Its two shallow pans sway once, then grow still as they are placed inside a shop. A small ceramic vessel, plain and useful, is carried through a doorway. Someone brushes dust from a threshold with a bundle of reeds. Another person gathers a few remaining objects from a low display and sets them carefully within. There is no need for haste. The day's exchanges are nearly finished. We follow the paving stones at an easy pace. Column, stone, shadow, footstep. Column, stone, shadow, footstep. The street visible here in the early to middle years of the 2nd century belongs largely to a period of Roman redevelopment. In the year 106, the Nabatean kingdom was annexed by Rome, and Petra became part of the Roman province of Arabia. New administrative customs arrived, and portions of the city were rebuilt in forms familiar across the Roman world. The broad paved street, bordered by columns, commercial spaces, and monumental buildings, was one expression of that change. This street is sometimes called a cardo, a Latin term often applied to a principal street in a Roman city. Yet Petra does not fit neatly into the straight and regular pattern found in some cities of the empire. Its builders worked with the shape of the valley, the surrounding cliffs, the course of the Wadi Musa, and the buildings and pathways already here. Long before Roman rule, an earlier Nabatean route had followed the wadi through the city. The newer street replaced or regularized portions of that older way, but it could not ignore the land beneath it. Petra bends because the valley bends. Its plan grows from stone, slope, memory, and water. Roman rule did not cause Petra to cease being Nabatean. Many of the people walking here still belong to families deeply rooted in the city and the surrounding region. Nabatean language, architecture, religion, pottery, customs, and other forms of material culture remain strong. Roman architectural ideas settle over the city as another layer, rather than erasing everything that came before. A column may follow a Roman fashion, while the building behind it preserves local ways of construction. A civic space may be reorganized, while merchants and craftspeople continue familiar work. New paving may cover an older path, yet that path still follows the valley, toward places long known to the people of Petra. The city has always gathered influences. Forms and ideas have arrived through connections with Arabia, the Levant, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Here, such influences are adapted to local stone, local needs, and a distinctly Nabatean city. The paving beneath us retains a little warmth. Its surface is firm but not perfectly even, and each softened footstep finds a slightly different tone. Between the columns lie commercial spaces. There are shops and storerooms, and perhaps workshops where useful objects are shaped, repaired, and prepared for sale. Doorways open into dim interiors, shelves, niches, and small counters withdraw into shadow. At one entrance, a shopkeeper draws a barrier into place. At another, two people finish a quiet exchange, their words too low to carry. A folded length of cloth disappears beneath an arm. A lamp is prepared, though it has not yet been lit. The columns establish a measured rhythm, without making the valley entirely formal. Beyond them, Petra remains irregular and layered. A street may widen into a civic space, narrow beside an older structure, or turn toward steps rising over uneven ground. Monumental buildings stand near modest rooms. Shops, civic spaces, streets, gardens, fountains, workshops, homes, temples, and monuments all share the shelter of the surrounding stone. Ahead near the street, the nymphaeum offers another quiet meeting between architecture and water. A nymphaeum is a monumental public fountain, designed as both an ornament and a gathering point. In Petra, its presence carries a particular meaning, because every controlled flow depends upon the channels, pipelines, dams, reservoirs, and cisterns spread throughout the landscape. The water does not need to leap high into the air. It slips into a basin and makes a low, continuous sound. A traveler pauses nearby. A child watches a small circle widen where a drop meets the surface. Someone carries a vessel close to the edge, careful with every movement. Along the basin, the stone is darker where water has touched it. The fountain belongs to the shared life of the city. People may meet here, pause here, or use it as a familiar point along the street. Its coolness is both practical and pleasing. Yet its presence does not mean that Petra is perpetually lush or naturally rich in water. The surrounding land remains arid. Rain is seasonal, and water must be captured, directed, stored, and released with care. Every fountain, garden, and pool depends upon knowledge, planning, and steady maintenance. There may be planted spaces nearby, sheltered where possible from the strongest sun. Gardens and pools could soften parts of the city center, bringing measured greenery into courtyards and major ceremonial complexes. These are not endless fields or overflowing streams. They are deliberate places, sustained by carefully managed water. A leaf stirs near the basin. Water touches stone. The surface trembles and then becomes quiet again. As we continue, the colonnaded street begins to feel more spacious. The closing shops no longer draw the eye, and the intervals between people grow longer. A pair of sandals crosses the paving and turns beneath a portico. A worker carries away a shallow basket. Farther behind us, the final awning has been secured. The buildings on either side remind us that Petra is not only a city of carved facades and tombs, it is also a place of ordinary civic life, with streets for movement, shops for exchange, workshops for skilled labor, and public spaces where people meet. Freestanding structures rise beside monuments cut into cliffs. Stone walls create rooms, courtyards, and sheltered passages. Grand architecture stands close to simple daily tasks. Here someone closes a shop. There someone carries water indoors. Farther on, a lamp is kindled beside a doorway. The sounds are small and separate now. A wooden panel settles into place. A vessel touches a shelf. Footsteps pass under the columns, fade across the paving, and disappear into one of the side spaces. In the softer light, the differences between periods seem less rigid. Nabatean foundations, Roman additions, regional forms, and imported details all take on the same evening colors. Rose, amber, muted gold, and deepening brown move gradually across columns and walls. The city does not belong to one moment alone. It carries many moments together. We continue toward the end of the street, where the paving leads in the direction of the Temenos Gate. A temenos is a sacred enclosed precinct surrounding a temple, a space set apart from the ordinary movement of the city. The gate marks the approach to the precinct of Qasr al-Bint, one of Petra's principal temples. Even from here, the approach feels more formal. The long commercial street gathers itself toward the gate. Beyond it, the buildings seem to hold a different kind of stillness. The movement of trade gives way to the measured arrangement of a sacred enclosure. We slow once more. Column, paving stone, lengthening shadow. The last voices behind us are absorbed by the valley. At the Nymphaeum, water continues its restrained murmur, supplied by channels that have crossed unseen distances. Its sound is quieter now, yet it remains present beneath the broader silence. A lamp appears under one of the porticos, its flame protected by a careful hand. For a moment, the light touches the base of a column and reveals fine tool marks upon the stone. Then the lamp moves on, becoming a small golden point beneath the deepening blue of evening. Ahead, the Temenos Gate rises between the street and the temple precinct. Beyond it stands Qasr al-Bint, its strong masonry holding the final warmth and color of the day. The sacred enclosure waits beyond the civic center, close to the shops and streets, yet distinct from them. Behind us, Petra's colonnaded street settles into rest. Scales have been put away. Vessels have been carried indoors. Doorways darken, and the colonnade becomes a long sequence of pale forms beneath the evening sky. The paving releases the warmth it gathered through the afternoon. Water rests in its basin. Shadows join beneath the porticos. The commercial street grows quieter behind us. Before us, the columns give way to the formal entrance of the sacred precinct. A final reflection of sunset rests upon the stone near Qasr al-Bint. Beside it, a newly kindled lamp holds one small point of gold, steady in the gathering dusk. Chapter 8. Temples in the Evening Light. The small lamp passes through the monumental gate, and its glow moves softly over the stone threshold of the sacred precinct. Beyond the gate, the broad enclosure lies open beneath the evening sky. The final sunlight has withdrawn from the lower stones, yet it still rests upon the upper walls of Qasr al-Bint, giving the masonry muted shades of amber and rose. The name Qasr al-Bint belongs to a much later age. In Arabic it means approximately castle of the pharaoh's daughter, though the building was neither a castle nor the dwelling of a legendary princess. It was a large freestanding Nabatean temple, probably built around the late 1st century BCE or the early 1st century CE, when Petra flourished as the center of the Nabatean kingdom. Unlike the many tombs and monuments cut directly into Petra's cliffs, Qasr al-Bint was constructed from separate blocks of stone. Its walls rose within a sacred precinct, approached through the formal gateway from the city's main street. Even now, with portions lost to time, the structure retains a quiet strength. Its thick masonry and high entrance speak of careful planning, skilled labor, and a desire to create a place set apart from the ordinary movement of the streets. We may gently imagine the experience of approaching it long ago. though the details must remain possibilities rather than certainties. A visitor might have slowed after passing through the gate. Voices may have softened in the open court. Footsteps would have crossed broad areas of paving before reaching the temple itself. Somewhere nearby, there may have been the mild fragrance of incense or oil. Perhaps a small offering was carried in a bowl or basket. Yet no complete account of a ceremony at Qasr al-Bint has survived. The exact routines of its priests and visitors are not known. The architecture remains, but the words once spoken here have faded. The temple may have been dedicated to Dushara, one of the principal Nabatean gods. Dushara was closely associated with the mountains around Petra, whose ridges and cliffs surround the city on every side. But the dedication of Qasr al-Bint is uncertain. The surviving evidence allows careful suggestions rather than a final answer, and so the old temple keeps part of its identity within the silence of its walls. Dushara was not the only deity honored by the Nabateans. Goddesses including Al-Uzza and Alat also held important places in their religious world. Through travel, trade, and contact, Nabatean religion encountered traditions from neighboring cultures. These influences were not simply copied. They were absorbed, adapted, and given new forms within Nabatean life. Divine beings could sometimes be represented as human figures, especially as artistic customs changed over time. Yet sacred stones and simplified forms remained important as well. One such sacred object is called a baytile, a stone understood to represent, or in some sense embody, a divine presence. A baytile might appear plain to someone unfamiliar with its meaning. It did not require an elaborate face, carefully carved clothing, or a lifelike posture. Its importance rested not in detailed appearance, but in what the stone signified. A simple form could hold profound meaning for the people who approached it. Perhaps in this imagined evening, someone pauses near such a sacred stone before continuing across the court. There is no need to invent the words that might have been spoken, or even to suppose that words were spoken at all. A moment of stillness is enough. A hand may have placed a modest offering nearby. A person may simply have stood for a little while in the cooling air. Then the visitor steps away, leaving the sacred stone, the threshold, and the open court much as they were before. The surviving evidence suggests that Nabatean religious practice included temples, altars, offerings, processions, and ritual dining. Sacred activity also took place at high places among the hills, where open-air spaces were shaped into the rock. These different settings connected worship with Petra's streets, mountains, public buildings, and shared meals. Still, the exact prayers, priestly duties, sequences of ritual, and deeper theological ideas are only partly understood. The stones preserve settings more readily than they preserve voices. They can show where people gathered and where an altar stood, but they cannot fully return the thoughts of those who came here. From the precinct of Qasr al-Bint, another great complex lies nearby, spread across a series of terraces. Today it is known as the Great Temple, but this is a modern archaeological name, not an established ancient title. The name is convenient because the site is Petra's largest known monumental complex. Even so, it should not be described exclusively as a temple with complete certainty. The complex rises in ordered levels, with courts, colonnades, stairways, and a principal building on an upper terrace. To approach it is to move from one carefully arranged space into another. Wide steps guide movement upward. Columns once framed the courts, while decorative stonework gave the architecture richness without disturbing its measured balance. The arrangement would have shaped the pace of anyone walking through it. A broad court allowed room to gather. A stairway narrowed and directed the approach. A colonnade offered shade beside an open space filled with light. Then another terrace rose ahead, creating a steady movement from lower levels to the main upper building. Among the fragments discovered there were ornate capitals carved with elephant heads. A capital is the uppermost part of a column, where the upright shaft meets the structure above. These elephant-headed capitals would once have appeared high above the people walking beneath them. Their carved forms belong to the varied architectural language of Petra, where Nabatean craftspeople absorbed and reinterpreted influences from beyond the city. Other decorative fragments once caught the sunlight along columns, ledges, and doorways. During the full brightness of day, the complex may have appeared layered and lively, with people moving between shaded colonnades and open courts. Now, as evening settles, the details grow softer. The columns are no longer distinct bands of color, but pale vertical forms against the deepening shade. Stairways begin to blend into terraces. Carved edges lose their sharpness. The broad architectural plan remains visible for a little longer, while the smaller ornaments recede into shadow. At a later stage, part of the upper building was altered to include a small theater-like seating area. Its curved rows suggest that people gathered there, but they do not tell us precisely why. The great temple complex may have served ceremonial, civic, administrative, or religious purposes. It may have combined several of these functions, perhaps at different times. People may have assembled there for formal occasions, public business, ceremonial events, or other shared activities. Yet the evidence does not permit one certain explanation. Its ancient role remains open to careful interpretation. Nor can every alignment of Petra's buildings be confidently connected with the stars, the sun, or a calendar. Astronomical interpretations have been proposed, but they remain debated. We may notice how evening light reaches a wall, or how a doorway frames a portion of the sky, without claiming that the effect was deliberately designed for a particular celestial event. For now, the fading light itself is enough. It lies in shallow bands across the terraces. It gathers along the edge of one step, then slowly leaves it. A column base remains visible after the shaft above has darkened. A carved fragment holds a final touch of color before becoming part of the general shade. The air moves gently through courts where gatherings may once have taken place. It carries the first coolness that follows the heat of the day. The stone beneath the open sky still releases a little warmth, while the higher air becomes calm and mild. Petra's sacred places belong to a city filled with many kinds of life. Worship was not entirely separate from roads, markets, meals, family ties, and public duties. A procession, if one passed here, would have approached along streets also used by merchants, craftspeople, neighbors, and travelers. Offerings were carried by ordinary hands. Ritual dining joined sacred practice with the familiar acts of preparing, sharing, and receiving food. The temples stood within the life of the city, not beyond it. People moved between public courts and private homes. They passed from colonnaded streets into sacred precincts, and later returned to doorways where lamps were being lit. The same evening air touched high temple walls, market paving, cistern openings, quiet animals, and household roofs. Behind us, the monumental gate darkens against the remaining sky. Qasr al-Bint holds the last trace of the day's warmth within its high masonry. Across the terraces, the great temple becomes a sequence of broad, restful shadows. There is no need to hurry away. We leave the precinct slowly, following the gentle descent toward the lower parts of the city. The lamp near the gateway grows smaller behind us. Footsteps become softer on the cooling ground. The great courts remain open to the sky, their columns and thresholds gradually losing their separate outlines. Then, beneath the temples and beyond the formal enclosures, another light appears. It is smaller than the lamp carried through the gateway. It shines from a doorway lower in the valley, warm against the deepening blue. From somewhere nearby comes the mild scent of grain cooking over a household fire. Behind us, columns, courts, stairways, and sacred stones settle into twilight. Ahead, within Petra's homes, the quiet routines of evening have begun. Chapter 9. Homes, Meals, and Ordinary Lives. The small light ahead remains steady as we leave the broad temple precincts behind. It shines from an ordinary doorway set within a wall of carefully fitted stone. The entrance is modest beside Petra's monumental facades, yet it belongs just as surely to the ancient city. Here, beyond the formal courts and processional ways, people prepared food, stored grain, repaired tools, welcomed guests, raised children, and completed the quiet tasks that gave shape to each day. Petra was not only a city of tombs and temples, it was a lived-in place, filled with houses of different sizes and arrangements, as well as workshops, gardens, courtyards, and civic spaces. Some rooms were cut partly into the sandstone, making use of the sheltering rock. Others were built from masonry, with stone walls rising around courtyards and beside narrow lanes. The homes of prosperous residents could be spacious, almost villa-like, with reception rooms, dining areas, storage chambers, and surfaces decorated with painted plaster or mosaics. Ancient Petra, then, was not simply a city of bare brown stone. Walls could be covered with smooth plaster and painted in warm reds, soft yellows, deep blacks, and other colors. Floors might carry patterns made from small pieces of stone. Textiles, baskets, lamps, pottery, wooden furnishings, and everyday objects brought still more color and texture to the rooms. Time has carried away much of that softness and brightness, leaving modern visitors with weathered walls and empty chambers. Archaeology allows us to restore, cautiously, a little of what has vanished. We follow the mild scent of cooking into a sheltered lane. Above us, the last daylight rests upon the higher cliffs, while down here evening has already become blue and cool. A low wall encloses a courtyard. Within it stands a stone basin, several storage jars, and a small collection of tools. A doorway opens into a reception room where a lamp has been lit. The household we are about to visit is gently imagined. No surviving record tells us the names of the people who lived behind this particular doorway or what they said as evening gathered. Yet the setting draws upon real houses, pottery, food remains, installations, and domestic objects found by archaeologists in Petra and the surrounding region. In the courtyard, a woman kneels beside a shallow grinding stone, drawing a smaller stone steadily across the grain. The movement is patient and familiar. Nearby, another member of the household checks a cooking pot placed close to the fire. Steam rises when the lid is shifted, carrying the plain, comforting fragrance of grain and herbs into the cooling air. Grain was a foundation of food throughout the ancient region. Wheat and barley could be made into bread, porridge, and other simple dishes. Petra's residents also had access to foods produced in nearby valleys and on cultivated terraces. Olives and olive oil, grapes and dried fruits, legumes such as lentils, and a variety of orchard and garden produce could all form part of the local diet. Sheep and goats supplied milk, meat, hides, and wool, while trade connected the city with products from farther away. Not every meal was elaborate. In many homes, evening food may have been a practical gathering of bread, oil, pulses, fruit, and whatever else the season and household allowed. Wealth, status, occupation, and circumstance would have made one table different from another. A merchant returning from a successful journey might offer guests imported flavorings or fine wine. A craft worker's family might rely more closely upon familiar local stores. Yet across those differences, the shared meal remained one of the quiet centers of domestic life. On a low surface beside the wall, round loaves wait beneath a cloth. A bowl holds lentils softened with herbs. There are olives in a smaller dish, and dried fruit has been set out with care. A little goat cheese rests in a plain pottery bowl. The vessels themselves deserve a moment of attention. Nabatean potters became known for exceptionally fine ceramics, especially delicate painted wares. Some bowls were made with walls so thin and even that they reveal remarkable control of clay and firing. Their surfaces could be decorated with graceful plant patterns and flowing lines and reddish paint. Such pottery was not merely useful. It could bring refinement and beauty to a meal, just as a patterned cup or carefully chosen plate might do in any age. Other vessels were sturdier. Large jars held grain, oil, wine, or water. Cooking pots stood close to the heat. Smaller containers kept spices, ointments, and other valued materials. Broken pottery might be discarded, reused, or incorporated into later layers of building. These fragments now help archaeologists understand trade, changing tastes, and the ordinary rhythms of household work. In our imagined courtyard, most of the bowls are practical, their surfaces worn smooth by many evenings of use. One finer dish is brought from the reception room and placed near the bread. Painted leaves curl around its inner rim. The household has used it often, but carefully. Beyond the courtyard lies a storage room, cooler and darker than the space around the fire. Jars stand against the walls. Baskets contain dried goods. A small quantity of oil is kept sealed against dust. Storage mattered greatly in Petra, where household supplies followed the seasons, and where water and harvests had to be managed with foresight. The same culture that built channels and cisterns across the city also understood the quieter discipline of preserving food within the home. Outside Petra's center, agriculture supported daily life. Rainfall was limited and irregular, but people worked with the land through terraces, channels, walls, and carefully chosen plots. These methods slowed runoff, held soil, and directed moisture toward places where crops could benefit. Gardens may have occupied suitable areas where water could be supplied. Herds move through the wider landscape, finding pasture according to season and local conditions. The desert around Petra was never simply empty. It was read closely. There was a slope that gathered rain, a hollow where soil remained, a spring, a patch of grazing, or a route between a settlement and its fields. Knowledge of these places passed through generations, often without being written down. Back in the courtyard, the meal begins without ceremony. People sit close enough to share the dishes placed between them. Bread is broken. A child reaches for an olive, then pauses at a quiet reminder to wait. Someone pours water from a jar into small cups. A traveler connected with the household speaks briefly of the market, now nearly closed, and of animals settled near the caravan grounds. Another voice mentions work to be done in a storeroom when morning returns. These details are imagined, but the pattern is deeply human. Petra's citizens had appointments to remember, repairs to finish, accounts to settle, relatives to visit, and children to guide. Some worked as merchants or caravan organizers. Others shaped stone, formed pottery, wove cloth, tended animals, cultivated land, served in public roles, or cared for sacred places. Many people must have moved between several kinds of work, as families often do. A prosperous house might receive guests in a decorated room, where painted walls and arranged couches expressed the owner's position. Dining in the ancient Mediterranean and Near Eastern worlds could carry social meaning, strengthening alliances and honoring visitors. Yet even formal rooms eventually returned to ordinary uses. Lamps needed filling, cups needed washing, floors needed sweeping. Food had to be carried in, and empty vessels carried away. The distinction between grand history and household life is thinner than it first appears. The wealth that raised Petra's temples and carved its facades passed through human hands. Traders needed meals after long journeys. Stoneworkers returned from the cliffs to rooms of their own. Priests, officials, gardeners, and craftspeople all depended upon grain ground in courtyards, water drawn from storage, oil poured from jars, and fires tended carefully as daylight faded. Now the dishes in the courtyard are nearly empty. Leftover bread is wrapped for later. A few embers settle beneath the cooking pot. One lamp is carried into a side room, revealing for a moment the painted plaster upon the wall. A simple band of red beneath a paler field. Its color glows warmly, then softens as the lamp moves on. The household sounds begin to diminish. A jar is covered. A door closes gently against the cool air. Somewhere along the lane, a hand loom gives one final wooden tap before the work is set aside. Farther away, a goat calls once from an enclosure, and then grows quiet. We step back from the doorway, leaving the family to the privacy of evening. Above the roofs and courtyards, Petra's higher monuments are becoming indistinct. The great facades remain, but they no longer dominate the valley. Small lamps scattered among homes and workrooms hold our attention instead. For a little while, each light marks an ordinary life. A meal has been completed, a story has been shared, a task has been postponed until morning. Then, one by one, the lamps are lowered. The lanes grow still. Warmth lingers in the masonry, stored gently within the walls, while beneath floors and beyond courtyards, cool water waits in shadowed cisterns. Overhead, the first stars appear between the darkening cliffs. The last household voices fade behind closed doors. Petra's ordinary evening settles beside its temples, tombs, gardens, workshops, and homes. And through the quiet valley, the stillness begins to rise toward the heights.